So welcome to the Evidence Files. My name's Rob. I'm here with my guest, Sanjeev. Sanjeev works with a company called PMsquare, which is based in the United States. He is the managing partner for PMsquare here in Nepal and also is based in the United States. And so we're going to talk about some business things and what your company does. So welcome to the show.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks for having me. Great to be here. So PMsquare is in the business of business consulting services, and one of the efforts that I'm leading is how do we help customers, PMsquare customers, to modernize their digital assets that are on data centers to really burst them into the cloud and take them through that cloud journey. As you know, today if you look at the stats, the adoption of cloud globally is less than 35%. I'm being optimistic when I say that, right? So there's a lot of opportunities. Customers, need to innovate. They need to innovate fast. Complexities have also, paramount around what they can and can't do. So PMsquare's sole purpose is to help these customers drive their business assets, their digital assets, into the cloud. Predominantly from an innovation standpoint, how do we and they, meaning the customer, do more with less? So that's what we are in the business of.
Right. So let's step back a second, because a lot of the people that watch this aren't tech people, right? So everybody talks about the cloud, right? But what does that mean for people? Like I think normal people who are not tech people, who don't thrive in this world, so to speak, just think of it as it's sort of like this place off in wherever, right? Mm-hmm. Where their data is just backed up or stored. So can you just talk a little bit more about how would you explain what it is to a layperson?
Yeah, so definitely. So in the layman's term, a cloud is anything that you have as backed up in a place. It's what I describe it as a geo-agnostic data center.
I like that, yeah.
Because which is very much secure. Contrary to what people say, they're very much secure. But in the layman's term, if everyone uses an iPhone, a lot of people use iPhone, right?
Sure.
Or any other mobile device. Their data that they use, like the iCloud, that is, you can think of cloud as one implementation of the iCloud, right? You want to have your data, but you also want to have your data that is accessible everywhere,
right?
And it's governed and secure. So. In the layman's term, the way I would describe a cloud is a geo-agnostic data center.
Right. So do you think that you were just talking a moment ago about the percentages of people and businesses using that? My suspicion is that it has to do with the fact that a lot of people don't know. A lot of people assume that happens on the background anyway, right? Mm-hmm. So when we have our phones, do you want to back it up? Yeah, sure, and that's it, right? That's all they have to do. So for businesses, how would you approach them to explain sort of how they mold it into their needs as opposed to just this sort of button that you push, I guess?
That's a great question. So when the issue, I shouldn't say issue, not a good word, but the biggest challenge for IT companies, services companies, that also includes software companies, is diving straight into the how, right? Mm-hmm. How should we do this?
Right.
Versus really trying to understand, stepping back and say, why are we even doing this? What is the compelling event,
right,
for somebody to go to the cloud? What is your business model? And then how does cloud fit into that business model? Or does it even fit into that business model, right? So I always look at the why. And then the what and the how is something that comes after.
Sure.
But we need to understand the why, the compelling event for a chief information officer or a chief marketing officer to move to the cloud, and how does that really help drive innovation? How does that really help cut cost? How does that help their both their IT team as well as their business team do more with less?
And so how would you answer one of those questions with like an example?
Sure. So, let's put into context from a. I'm a big. I love to work out, and I'm a workout junkie.
Well,
And so,
I think some people might have guessed.
so one of the efforts that we are doing is what we're calling, and Suraj is part of that, is what we're calling a sim AI, a simulation AI. And essentially it's focused around the idea of a medicine 3.0, right? So and it was if you there's a book by a Dr. Peter Attia, and he talks about medicine 3.0, and essentially medicine 3.0 is how do you create early interventions to understand in 20 years what the chronic disease might be, and take precautionary measures to help the patients and also the doctors that prescribe certain preventative measure plans, right? So what is the compelling event there? The compelling event is to create a better health span that leads to better lifespan, right?
Right.
Dr. David Sinclair talks about lifespan. What we are trying to do in this scenario is creating better health span. And in order to do that, you would need a platform for the hospitals and clinics, something that they don't. The hospital and clinic don't have to cut their arms and legs to implement, but it can be done in months rather than years. So what we want to help our customers is through this solution, we are able to enable them in the cloud process, because compelling event is to give them preventative measures, health measures, so that they can figure out a way to lessen the chronic illnesses that might be in the next 20 years. I mean, everyone in this room today, I bet you $100 we have some form of chronic disease that is already incubating in our body.
Right.
If we can capture those, those chronic diseases through biomarkers, through personalized treatment plans, through a lifestyle, right? That is what the compelling event really is, and then driving that, building that solution and driving that to adoption is done through cloud, because it is very, it creates that innovation. By nature, when somebody defines cloud, it is a disruptor, right? They call the word disruptor. And so with these specific use cases where you are focusing on compelling events, you're driving that outcome to the business, the value outcome, right? So that is kind of the true example of what the compelling events really mean. At PMsquare, one of the things that I'm driving towards, like I'm uberly focused on and very passionate about, is I want us to be known for a company who is helping drive that value outcome. We start with a discussion of a use case on specific, industry solutions, and we end with a use case for specific verticals, specific industry solutions. And we want to do that in the cloud, right? Today we have a very strategic goal to drive this outcome through AWS, Amazon Web Services, but in the future we'll also have other cloud providers doing the same thing. But the goal is to build out all these use cases, and then through Amazon Web Services native services, whether it's in data engineering, artificial intelligence, deep learning, and even generative AI.
So, one thing that I think some people listening to this might say is, okay, I have, a company that has 60 employees and 5,000 customers. I could see why that would matter. But what about like someone who's maybe on the smaller side? When they're listening to this, I think many of them would be sort of reluctant. Like, how's that going to help me, right? I only have 50 employees and we only do maybe $1 million a year or something. We would be considered like a smaller company. Is there an application? Like, I guess what I'm asking is it a scalable thing that can scale very much down just as much as very much up?
100%. So it would be more applicable for small companies, because if you think about it, what small companies have that big companies don't have, or I should say the other way around, what small companies don't have that the big companies have is small companies don't have the baggage. They don't have the legacy baggage.
Meaning
that they don't have a Visual Basic application running in their system, which is their bread and butter, right? So they don't have that legacy. They don't have the old code base.
Right.
They don't have tech debt.
Yeah.
So so those companies, if they want to scale, cloud is perfect for them, because what cloud allows them to do is, and I'm being a little techie right now, so bear with me, but at the what we call ephemeral environment. So ephemeral environment really means that you decouple your compute and storage, which you can easily do in the cloud, right? So once that you can do that, you create this compute and storage environment, and you can scale up and scale down, right? So, and that scaling up and scaling down is very conducive for OpEx. And small companies are driven more by OpEx than CapEx, right? But I can't do that when I go to, like state and local governments, right? Like the SLGs and higher eds, because they have these legacy, and their funding is all based on CapEx, right? So I would say that it's much more conducive for SMBs rather than enterprises.
Yeah, and I would say that just running like a small app server, hosting an app, and doing some small things like that. That's where scalability comes in really noticeably, even if you're not a tech person, you're a tech company, because all of a sudden it's like, wow, more, we've increased 10% of our market share, but we've increased 100% of our, data caps. So
Exactly.
Scalability there, I think, is where smaller companies and smaller businesses aren't thinking about it too much, because your electronic needs can actually balloon way past your customer base, because your customers, maybe you're not picking up as many new ones as quickly, but the ones that you have want more and more stuff, right?
Precisely.
So that's more like one area where I think it comes in quite a bit.
Yeah, scale, when it comes to cloud, you don't have to think about scale, because it is already built in with that what they call the shared model, right?
Yeah.
And with the inventions these days with serverless architecture, scale is something that is already part of the platform that they provide. And what you're doing is you're applying those the core principles, right, to build out this platform using microservice architectures, whatnot, right? All the patterns that you can think of from architecture standpoint.
So let's shift it just for a second about security, right? So I'm a cybersecurity guy, right? And
I figured this was coming.
right? Well, you kind of can't help it anymore, right? So I've worked on both sides of it, where I was on the side looking for people who violated other people's platforms or whatever, and then also helping people from a preventative standpoint. So if a customer comes to you and says, how does what you're offering help me on the security side, because I'm just a little mom and pop shop that has a good online retail sales or something, let's just say that.
Right.
And so for them, it's like, all I know is I read all the time, this hack, that hack, these things. But like, how does engaging with your company help me on that part of it?
Right. So security is fundamental to whatever we do. Every vendor, partner, solution provider says the same thing, right? We have to be very security conscious, security first. In the data centers, back in those days, right? Still, people who are using legacy systems, they have to worry about security all the time, because you don't know what ports are open at what time, right?
Sure.
So you have to be very so there's a lot of work for CISOs
Yeah.
around the policies and procedures. In the cloud, cloud security is still a pretty important piece. The guardrails have to be set up, in the what they call the shared model around security. But the security in the cloud is much more robust because the level of security that can be applied is pretty granular, right? So if you think about from a cloud standpoint, through account segmentation, right, micro segmentations, which is one aspects of security in the cloud, you are really able to segment these accounts so that when a hacker logs into one account, he or she can traverse the system, right? Because it's segmented out. So account segmentation is a huge thing. Then you come down into like the virtual private cloud, VPCs is what they call, and there's VPCs level segmentation. And then you come down to your databases, right? Whether you're using columnar database, or you're using row-based databases, or even graph-based databases, you are creating the security in the in the column level or in the row level, using various aspects of security controls. So what I'm trying to say is that security is much more granular when it comes to cloud. And because of the fact that our company focuses in the cloud first model, cloud first and security first model, we are able to apply that. The other aspects to security is that back in those days, before doing the cloud stuff, security was always an afterthought. Even when you're writing a piece of code, you never thought about security as that first foray of mindsets that you had to plug into your patterns, right?
Yeah.
There's always you didn't write a test case around security,
right?
Because that didn't exist.
Sure, like not even that long ago.
Yep.
Yeah.
So now with cloud, if you use Terraform, HashiCorp Terraform, which is essentially IAC's infrastructure as code, you are able to put those security controls on that code base itself. So you see that you are already starting to think from a security first mindset. And when you put that code into GitHub and let Git flows kind of transition that code from lower environments to higher environments, it's already ingrained in that.
Yeah.
So security from a code level is already implemented. Now with the invention of ChatGPTs and what folks are doing around prompt engineering, it has even more better implementations as well as implications.
So I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to ask that. So many people probably also are looking at ChatGPTs and other types of sort of algorithmic AI models as, well, can't the bad guys use those for the same type of implementation for the bad stuff, right? I think a lot of regular users would probably ask that, right? So like I've had people ask me like, if somebody can just go onto ChatGPT or one of these other models and say, write me some kind of malicious code, and they can get it to do it, right? Which some testing has shown that if you do the prompt right, it'll produce whatever you actually want. You just have to kind of play around with the prompt, right? So what would you say as far as that potential problem? How do like from your perspective, how do you guys think about that, and how do you sort of prepare or defend against it?
Right. So that's a great question. I would be lying if I would say that I have an answer for this question. Right?
Sure.
Because it's a tricky question and a tricky answer.
And a new problem.
And a new
frankly.
problem. Correct. That simply means that our the work of the CISO and the work of the office of the CISO has just kind of added another complexity to the level. What we from PMsquare standpoint is, what we do is, because we think about security as that first level of implementation, those are things that we have to start thinking about, and those are things that we have to talk to the CISOs and the security consultants within their group. And that is why we believe that there's the idea of shift left paradigm. We need to be doing these types of testings up front, right?
Right.
So we need to create the right test cases that supports these types of issues. Software design lifecycle just became even more complicated, and a true value add to that complication would be security first. And so we need to approach it that way, right? We need to have a structure around it, and then, as much as possible, we need to do testings up front. The whole shift left paradigm has even more accelerated by the fact that chat GPTs and being able to have them write these malicious code bases has really changed the game of cybersecurity and cloud security.
Yeah. Well, one thing I would say from my own experience is that one clever way that people are adapting to that issue is to do the same thing, right? So,
Right.
So I teach ethical hacking, and ethical hacking basically just, so for the parents out there, hacking itself is not a good or bad thing.
Right.
Hacking is just, infiltrating a system in a way that the system wasn't designed for infiltration, basically is all it is, right? And so, in the business, we have the black hats and the white hats, right? The black hats are the ones that are doing it for all the wrong reasons, but the white hats are doing the same thing so they can prevent the
Right.
black hats, right? So when it comes to LLMs and other types of generative AI, what more and more teams are starting to do, and I think it still needs to leak down into the education system of it, but I think it's just because it's such a novel problem, it's not quite there yet.
Right.
But what people are starting to do is to run attacks against their own code using those models, because those models are, as you know,
100%.
it's an algorithmic probability platform, essentially. It can run a bunch of different things that we humans could do, but on a scale that we humans can barely comprehend, right?
Right.
So if I can get that kind of program to attack my code and find, run 50 million simulations against it to find the infiltration, that's way better than I can do as a person who can maybe run 50, right?
Right.
So I think more people are starting to turn in that direction to sort of essentially do the white hat version of what the bad guys are already doing.
Right.
So I think you'll see more of that. What I'm hoping is that the developers of those models, like your OpenAIs and Microsoft with theirs and companies like that, what I'm hoping that they'll do is turn those as with an eye towards security as well, like have a security platform,
100%.
right?
Yeah, you make a good point. One of the use cases that like more of a horizontal, it's a generic use case that our team is building today is around data augmentation, right? So how are you able to create these synthetic data sets using Gen AI?
Right.
In the case of one of the healthcare use cases that the team is working on, we're using a model called MedGAN, medical generative. I forget the name of the A, but it's network, right? It's MedGAN. And so what we are essentially doing is creating these synthesized data sets. It allows, it really allows, by doing data augmentation, it allows from a security construct standpoint to create all these simulations that you just mentioned, right? If you can create hundreds of simulations about different patterns using different code bases, it is so much better, and you can capture so many permutations, combinations of these issues versus doing that in a manual way. So data augmentation, using generative AI is going to be the thing, and it is going to really help I wouldn't say knock down the barriers of security, but I would say that it would allow security to be more conducive of what that problem at hand is, right? So I think that data augmentation, you're spot on. Data augmentation is the right thing to do in this space.
Yeah, I think that that's 100% correct. I think the area that has to catch up is in the education part, right? And part of that is because it's difficult to create a curriculum or a structured course when all of this is still kind of
Yes.
floating around in the experimental stage. But you're seeing more and more researchers focus on that, which is really nice because the researchers research, they find some conclusions or at least some trends, then they report back,
Right.
and then those reporting back, it goes to the educators, and then so it will evolve that way. But I think what's really interesting about it is, one of the approaches when I teach a cybersecurity class is I try to teach them from think like the bad guy,
Right.
right? So if I kind of have an idea of what he's going to try to do, I can follow the same
Same pattern.
procedure,
Yeah.
same application to plug the holes that he's going
Right.
to exploit, right? So let me shift gears just a little bit because
Mm-hmm.
this is the area I wanted to get into a bit more. So and the technical stuff is all super fascinating, but the other part of it that's really fascinating to me is, so you're managing partner for here in Nepal. So let me speak generally first. What do you think in general is the technology market in Nepal sort of looking like and where it's going?
A great question. So, let me put some context first before I answer that question.
Sure.
So, I went to US 26 years ago, when I was 19, 20, and my sole purpose was just to go for education at the time, right? I had no aspirations or, inclinations to stay there for a very long time. And fast forward now, 26 years later,
Life
I'm still there.
happens.
Life happens, right?
Right.
You get, kids have grown, and so life has happened. And I always had this aspiration to come back. Not so much, completely come back, so to speak, but, and I put this on my LinkedIn profile as well, kind of why I'm doing this. I wanted to do something for this community, and I felt like after interacting with global workforce, I felt like the talent here in Nepal, there is a lot of good talent, both from an aptitude as well as attitude standpoint, and both are needed, right?
Sure.
Like they say in healthcare, right? 80% is diet and 20% is exercise.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. 80% is attitude, and then 20% is attitude. 80% is attitude and 20% is aptitude.
Yeah.
So I wanted to give something back to the community, and I wanted to create that that lineage that I have completely lost in the last 26 years. I would come here and I would vacation here for a month or so, go back, and that is it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now with with starting a new company from the ground up, building something that is very unique, focused on business consulting, being the firstborn in the cloud company, and providing the exposure to our talent community. That's where I feel like we can do so much. And then from going back to your question on the maturity of IT here in Nepal, I do feel that Nepal has a really good maturity curve. If you take a look at it, the problem, I shouldn't say problem, but the challenge that we have, or the opportunity, where there's gap, there's opportunity.
Sure.
Where the opportunity is that we can have these really smart individuals from rethinking how to work in this new workforce.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to go to the States or Australia or Canada or anywhere else in the world. You can do that here, and you can have a very good lifestyle by doing it here. With ample of opportunities to rethink what you want to do in the next 15, 20 years.
Right.
So that has created a new excitement, at least for my team. I felt like my team was very excited when I talked about this value proposition. So the talent is here. We do have some of the new junior folks who have just joined PMsquare Nepal. I have seen that there is talent.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would agree. 100%. Not the people even. I'm just talking about my exposure, right?
What they do not have is, I wouldn't say do not have, what what they're lacking right now is the exposure part.
Yeah.
And the confidence.
Yeah. And a concrete goal.
And a concrete goal. Yes.
To some extent, because
Yes.
because things are kind of in flux.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So that is truly my passion. My passion is to give back to the roots that I've come from, and in that same token, create the lineage that I think I've lost in the last 20 some years.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the one thing I would add to that, from the opportunity standpoint, is I think one huge advantage that Nepal has that a lot of younger people here sometimes miss is everybody, like if you're comparing like the US, the EU, Australia, they made a whole bunch of mistakes already, right? So moving forward here, you can learn from their mistakes and not have to like suffer any of the same developmental tangles that many other places have, right? So like, even a newer problem, right? Like LLMs, the original release of LLMs, ChatGPT 1.5 or whatever the first public one was, was kind of a disaster, frankly, right? And then they put out another one and it solved some problems and also created a few other problems and then still had a few other problems in between, right? That's kind of how the technological development has gone in many of those other places that I think many people are thinking as like the advanced places, right? But the kind of beauty of it here is, we don't have to, those mistakes don't have to happen here, right? Because we can look at that and say, okay, don't do that.
Exactly.
Don't do that, but that worked really well. Let's do that, So like that's one thing that when I talk to young people, I try to encourage them, like you sort of have this opportunity to do great things and skip over some of the stuff that was challenging in other places, right? So that's kind of like when you said opportunity, that was the first thing I thought is it's a golden opportunity in a way because you can leave out some of the
you can learn from those mistakes and not repeat them, but at the same time figure out a way to make them better.
Yeah.
And it can be applied to not just what you do as your career, but also what you do and how you conduct your lifestyle as well, right? Because you learn from mistakes and that's how you grow. So I think the talent here in Nepal is there. We as thought leaders in this space should figure out a way to harness those talents, make them excited, and give them ample of opportunities, and then the world is their oyster, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's where we can really have an impact, and that's why I came. I really wanted to do something. I would say unique. One of the guys I was talking to a couple of university folks professors right before coming here, and I said, listen, this is what I want to do, and I said, listen, this is not a unique idea. It's not a brain shattering, world shattering idea. It's an idea that I'm sure other people have also done, but my aspiration is very different than what other people want.
Sure.
I want PMsquare to be the hub for Southeast Asia, and then expand from there.
Yeah. Earlier when we were talking about the cloud, I think you used the term, was it geo-agnostic?
Geo-agnostic, yeah.
So Nepal as a country, of course, is very geostatic, right?
Right.
So do you see that as an advantage, disadvantage, indifferent? So for my foreign viewers who maybe aren't as familiar, Nepal sits pretty comfortably in between India and China, right? And so that political world often is a factor in a variety of different things. So I'm not speaking to the politics specifically. I'm thinking more from a market standpoint. But you're between two very large markets that are in many ways self-interested but global at the same time, right? So like there's Chinese businesses that have huge market in China because China's a huge place, just like in India. And then there's also global companies in both of those places. So how do you see where Nepal fits into that sort of, paradigm between them?
Yeah, I think I've always thought that Nepal, you know, has the benefit. It can become a blessing in disguise when you look at two large, world powers, and you're right in between. So, but I don't think that due to geopolitical reasons here in Nepal, and I don't want to get into politics
Of
right
course,
now, but
yeah.
due to the geopolitical reasons, we haven't been able to tap the opportunities between India and China. We are seeing that slowly now, where because of the fact that the global market is shifting and relying so much heavily in India and China right now, that we are getting trickle effects of opportunities from them.
Right.
That is, they're subbing, right? They're essentially subbing those works to IT companies here in Nepal, which is generating the revenue that you want, the foreign investments that you want. But I don't think so. We are, we still do not have the level of. There's some gaps,
Yeah.
and I think we can tap into those gaps. But
Yeah.
it can be a blessing in disguise between China and India.
I guess that was sort of where I was going with that is, it's, to me at least, it seems like there's a potential to gain the benefit of essentially having two mass markets very
Right.
close by, right? Political and logistical issues aside, technology is in many ways borderless for the most part anyway, right? So, businesses that are formed and operating in Nepal, it seems like just by proximity, would have some opportunities to gain some of the benefits of this, just the sheer size of those
Right.
markets, right?
Right.
Because like when you build in the U.S., for example, physically speaking, you're pretty isolated. Your only other market is Canada, right? And Canada's population is smaller than the entire just the size of New York State, right? So if your market is in some ways dependent on geophysical space, it can be challenging in the U.S. to break free of the U.S. market because there's no other market nearby.
Right.
So I think in terms of here, because not all businesses are technology businesses, even though they rely on technology. So it seems like it almost gives some business opportunity to reach into those markets a little bit more through the technology,
Right.
but to have the physical proximity if they're running physical products and services, right? So that's sort of where I was kind of thinking.
100%. If you, I do not want, yes, granted that I've just started to do some business in Nepal, right? I do not know how things are done at the ground root level, right? I understand there's a lot of challenges.
Sure.
And Nepal is not very well known for being a clean country in terms of corruptions and other things. So I do see some challenges there, but in the long run, I do not want Nepal to be like a Mexico to USA.
Yeah.
I want Nepal to evolve, like
Stand on its own.
stand on its own from a tech standpoint.
Yeah.
Being able to leverage China and India as much as possible, and also mature its IT ecosystem here.
Yeah. Well, and I would say to the question of image, right? For Nepal, I think that cuts a little bit both ways. One, as you know, a lot of people outside of Asia in particular really don't know that much. Nepal is associated with sort of these ideas about its tourism industry,
Right.
and some of the grand features of that, right? So it seems to me like there's that also is an opportunity to focus on perception, right? One way to do that is to get some companies that are coming out and producing really excellent platforms,
Right.
Doing it at an economic rate because it's cheaper to do some things here than it is in some other places.
Right.
So I don't see the perception as a long-term problem. I think it's a short-term problem only in that there isn't a huge perception at all, I guess, right? It's kind of like, if you ask somebody, there was in the U.S., right, with the Ukraine thing, one of the ways that they sort of addressed it on TV shows was like, oh, where is Ukraine on a map? And a lot of people didn't know. They just know the sort of story, right? I think that's in many ways sort of the similar perception problem Nepal has.
Agreed. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you summed it up pretty well. In our business, perception is reality.
Right.
Right. So, so changing that perception is going to take time.
Sure.
It's even if we have the best maturity around tech stack or tech ecosystem here in Nepal with really good universities, the perception still remains that hey, Nepal is only known for
Mount Everest,
the Himalayas,
right.
and everyone is Sherpa.
Right.
That's basically that's what the perception of Nepal at least back in the States.
Yeah.
At least in Colorado it is, right? So
well, in New York too. So
right.
There's a lot of space in between.
So I think we're positioned well. I call it the UPOD, under promise, over delivered.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're in a pretty good space to do that right now. And I think through what's going on with the emergence of IT companies,
mm-hmm.
regardless of whether they focus on products and or services, has really started to pick up. And I think it's a matter of time before we can be that mini India. From a tech stack. We can be that mini, like Kathmandu can be that mini Bangalore, or the Hyderabad or the Punes of India's, right? So I definitely see that happening in the next 4 to 5 years.
One of the greatest advantages you bring, in addition to experience elsewhere and knowing how other places and other companies and other ideas are being implemented, is helping people here bridge the gap to external markets.
Right.
In any business, it's challenging to figure out how to break into a market that has some of its own peculiarities, mm-hmm. right? So even if I'm running a software company in the U.S.,
right,
it's not like I can just easily start selling things in the UK, right? I think here there's a feeling of even more of an obstacle there. Partly to that perception problem, other companies and other markets aren't even thinking about businesses here.
100%.
And so they need people like you and companies like yours and people doing similar things to help bridge that gap.
And I love that question, Rob, because it's core to it's one of the cores to what I want to do, right? Mm-hmm. I want to be that touch point between the U.S. market and Nepal, because if you think about it, and I've been in this consulting business for a long time, so I've worked with people from the Northeast, Southeast, Central, West, mm-hmm. Mountains. Each geolocation and people, how they speak.
Sure.
What they speak, how they interact is different.
Yeah, 100%.
Like, when you are in a call with a company in Northeast, they don't stop around and say, hey, hi, how was your weekend?
Right.
They get right to the point, right? They come into a call with a purpose.
Right.
But if you are talking to a customer in the central region, they always start the conversation, especially when it's a Monday. They always start the conversation. How was your weekend?
Right.
So it's more interpersonal. And if you go to the south, people are, you get that southern comfort, right? The southern hospitality.
30 minutes of conversation before that.
Right. Before you get to the
conversation.
And it only take you about a couple of minutes, right?
Yeah.
So I would love to, not just me, my leadership would love to support. If somebody wants to understand the market, if somebody wants to come up with an idea, I definitely want to support and help that person or that company. Whether even doing business with them. If they come to us and say, hey, we have this great idea, but we don't have the exposure, we don't have the market, then yeah, absolutely. And that's what I really want to do, right? Besides supporting and building PMsquare Nepal, one of the aspirations is also to connect folks, like-minded folks from here to there, so that we can build something together.
Yeah, and I think that I think that there's a lot of people that are interested. So I don't see you having any real problem sort of getting into that in some volume, right?
Right.
There's a lot of businesses here that would love to be able to expand and conduct their business, whether it's a service or product, in larger markets, and bring more money here, and
right.
Maybe more family members can stay here and operate the business instead of having to go abroad and operate the business, that sort of thing. So I think that people are going to be really, really happy about that.
Yeah, 100%. And I would love from your outreach and to your audience over here, if anyone has questions or they need to reach out to me, I would definitely be able to support and help their vision, whether it's through collaboration or just giving them advice.
So to that end, we'll wrap up with that. What I'll do is I'll connect with you after this, and YouTube has the nice little descriptions down below. We'll put in whatever links or contacts that you
100%
want to offer, and then people can reach out to you directly. On my website, if people want to reach out to you, we'll have like some kind of email address or a link. Or they can reach me, and then I can reach out to you and connect you.
Great. Yeah. If people have any technology questions, PMsquare is in the business of providing business consulting. We focus on generative AI, anything to do with data, and then application transformation. We don't call it application transformation. We call it application revitalization. Because through Gen AI, you are really trying to give life to that application, that old application, to create a new application from it. So if your listeners, your audiences have questions around, or folks in your network want to communicate with me or with my leadership in PMsquare, love to have that discussion.
Yeah, for sure. All right, great. Thanks so much. This was actually a really interesting conversation. I love that we started on the kind of techie side and then evolved into the sort of business side.
The good part about this is what I found is I used to do this thing called customer collision before, and so part of that was I used to invite all the C-level folks and have a formal, informal dinner conversation. And we used to always start with, and the conversation always started with technology, but at the end of the evening, it will always end up with people, right? So it's technology, process, and then people, right? So
well, it's like it's the high calorie stuff first,
right?
And then as you start getting,
Yep.
So
yep.
All right. Well, listen.
Awesome.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, sir. Yep.
And I'm sure we'll be in touch.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thanks.
Great.
Appreciate it.